All eyes on the Straits of Hormuz. And the Straits of Hormuz is not just about the Straits of Hormuz at this point. It's really about the entire trajectory of the war, the ceasefire, the negotiations, where things are headed. So let's get right to it. We'll start with a report from today, from just a couple of hours ago, from Fox News. Here we go.
Happening right now. Here we go again. A volatile situation in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has once again closed the strait, even firing at ships trying to cross it. President Trump reacting to that just moments ago.
They got a little cute, as they have been doing for 47 years. We're talking to them. They wanted to close up the strait again, as they've been doing for years. And they can't blackmail us.
Let's get to Matt Finn. He is live in Dubai with why Iran suddenly changed its mind. Matt?
Aisha, we didn't make it a full 24 hours of the Strait of Hormuz being open, and now an intelligence official tells our Treyinks that the Iranian regime has closed the strait again. That intelligence official saying the Strait of Hormuz is under full IRGC control and effectively closed at this moment. Multiple vessels have been forced to turn around since this morning as they attempted to pass through the strait. The IRGC opened fire on at least one vessel as part of the closure policy they declared last night. Now, yesterday, around this hour, President Trump and Iranian foreign minister announced that the strait is open. But shortly afterwards, Iranian officials started to post that Iran was maintaining restrictions to pass through the strait, including payments. And also here in the Middle East, Israel's IDF claims the 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon is not solid either. The IDF posting Hezbollah ceasefire violation. Since the ceasefire came into effect, IDF soldiers south of the Yellow Line in southern Lebanon identified several incidents in which terrorists violated the ceasefire understandings by approaching from north of the Yellow Line towards IDF soldiers, posing an immediate threat. In order to remove the threat, the IDF conducted precise strikes against the terrorists and terrorist infrastructure sites. Now, the president has said that the second round of peace talks could possibly be happening in Pakistan in the next day or two. But now, as Iran claims it has control of the strait again and is firing at ships, it's not clear if the 2-week ceasefire, which will expire soon, will be extended or scrapped. Here's the president last night.
You don't have a deal by wedding ceasefire at 2 weeks. Set ceasefire was.
I don't know. Maybe I won't extend it. But the blockade is going to remain. But maybe I won't extend it. So you have a blockade, and unfortunately, we'll have to start dropping bombs again.
So we had these two major announcements, the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, and then also the president saying that the Strait of Hormuz is open. Now both seem to be failing. So we are tracking hour by hour the possibility of the second round of peace talks in Pakistan. Will keep you updated, Asha.
Okay, hopefully we get some information tonight, as the president promised. Matt Finn live for us in Dubai. Matt,
Okay. Is anybody here surprised? Is anyone here surprised that that the Lebanon ceasefire is failing? I mean, Israel carrying out strikes against Hezbollah, making movements in the south. Yeah, that's what happens with every single ceasefire. Every single ceasefire Israel's ever had with Hezbollah has ended with, well, during the ceasefire, what ends up happening is Hezbollah starts violating it, and Israel strikes them. It always gets framed as Israel violating the ceasefire because Israel strikes Hezbollah. And what Hezbollah is doing is they're moving weapons into place, they're rebuilding positions, they're moving people around, they're planning attacks. And the ceasefire, the text of the ceasefire agreement was put out by the State Department, explicitly states that Israel reserves the right to strike if they see any attacks being planned. Israel's not going to wait to be attacked. Anyway, so there's no surprise there. But let's take a look at a little bit more about the Strait of Hormuz situation, because that's the real big one here. That's what we really need to be discussing. So let's get it. So first of all, Iranian state media, top story today, from the strait is fully open to a return to full control. So they're beating their chests and crowing about how Trump stood up and said, the strait is fully open, and now the Iranians are once again in full control. They're all proud of themselves. I'm not going to bother reading the piece. It's not that interesting. But also in Iranian state media, we have this. I'm sorry, whatever. This is the piece. I'm not going to read it. There's no point. There's nothing new in it. But they put up this other piece a few hours later. Third clash in the Strait of Hormuz within 2 hours. Listen to this one. The United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations has reported that a cruise ship was targeted in an attack east of Oman an hour ago, marking the third maritime incident in the region within a 2-hour window. According to the UK MTO report, an incident occurred approximately 3 nautical miles east of Oman. The captain of the cruise ship reported seeing a water splash and surge in close proximity to the vessel, likely caused by a projectile impacting the water's surface. Less than an hour prior to this, the organization reported that a container ship located 25 nautical miles northeast of Oman was struck by an unidentified projectile. The strike reportedly caused damage to several containers on board. Earlier today, 2 Indian vessels, one which was an oil tanker, attempted to transit the Strait of Hormuz without obtaining the required permits from Iran. The IRGC Navy opened fire, forcing both ships to turn back. The surge in incidents follows a brief period of diplomatic de-escalation. Last night, following the Lebanon ceasefire, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi announced the Strait of Hormuz would be temporarily open for commercial vessels. However, citing American bad faith, the spokesperson for the Khatam al-Anbiya central headquarters announced this morning that strict controls have been reinstated. The spokesperson clarified that the Strait of Hormuz will remain under intense supervision and return to its previous restricted status until the United States ends all interference with the free movement of vessels traveling to and from Iran. And I mentioned in a previous video that Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, said at the end of his remarks a few days ago when he was talking about the blockade of the Straits by the United States, by the blockade of Iran, that not only is the United States blockading Iran, essentially laying siege to Iran by blocking all of its ports, not just the Strait of Hormuz, but also doing interdictions, seizing vessels that are carrying that originate in Iran, even in the Pacific, meaning this is a complete blockade of the Iranian economy. Anyway, despite renewed tensions, marine traffic data confirmed that one passenger cruise ship successfully transited the Strait of Hormuz last night for the first time in 47 days. That's the end of the story. Iran, and here's a fuller treatment of it. Iran reimposes Hormuz closure after U.S. maintains blockade. IRGC gunboats fire at ships. Tehran warns it will continue to block the strait as long as Trump blockades Iran-linked shipping. That's accurate. Iran-linked shipping. It's not even a blockade just of Iran. As I said, they're even doing interdictions far away from Iran. U.S. president says blockade in full force until regime reaches a deal, including on its nuclear program. Iran swiftly reversed course on reopening the Strait of Hormuz on Saturday, reimposing restrictions on the critical waterway after the U.S. said it would not end its blockade of Iran-linked shipping. Iran's Joint Military Command said that control of the Strait of Hormuz has returned to its previous state under the strict management and control of the armed forces. Let's be very clear, by the way. Iran has no right to do this. This is not their territorial waters. The Strait of Hormuz is an international waterway, which means no one has the right to impose any tolls or to have any restrictions on it. This entire thing is terrorism, is piracy, it's illegal. Okay, it's mafia protection tactics. Okay, it's all illegal. Iran's Joint Military Command said that, fine. It warned that it would continue to block transit through the strait as long as the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports remains in effect. And Trump has no inclination to remove that blockade. And rightly so. We'll get to that in a bit. Commercial ships came under fire and threats from Iran's military as they tried to cross the Strait of Hormuz, security monitors said. IRGC gunboats fired on a tanker in the strait northeast of Oman. The UK Maritime Trade Operations Center said in an online statement, adding that the vessel and crew were safe. Vanguard identified the tanker as the India-flagged tanker Sanmar Herald. It cited the captain as saying two IRGC patrol boats approached it with no radio contact and shots were fired, resulting in damage to the bridge windows. They didn't even warn them. They just fired on them. Vanguard said separately that the Malta-flagged cruise ship Mein Schiff 4 reported a splash nearby while crossing near Oman on the far side of the strait from Iran. The ship confirmed VHF radio traffic from IRGC units saying, "We are carrying out operation. We will fire and destroy you," but no damage was reported. That just sums up Iran's entire military. We will fire and destroy you, but no damage was reported. In the third incident, UK MTO said that it also received a report of a container ship in the same area being hit by an unknown projectile, which caused damage to some of the containers, but no fire. So they're firing on ships. They're doing it. Hours earlier, speaking to reporters, U.S. President Donald Trump had cited some pretty good news about Iran, declining to elaborate, but he also said fighting might resume without a peace deal by Wednesday, when a 2-week ceasefire expires. On Friday evening, he had posted on Truth Social that Iran has agreed never to close the Strait of Hormuz again, and which the Iranians then, of course, that's what they were crowing about here, that we went from the strait is fully open to return to full control, and then trying to make Trump look like a fool for saying that it was totally open. The ongoing conflict over the strait has threatened to deepen the energy crisis, roiling the global economy after oil prices began to fall again on Friday on hopes that the U.S. and Iran were drawing closer to an agreement. And then it mentions again how much oil passes through there. Early Saturday, a convoy of oil tankers was observed crossing the Strait of Hormuz, the first major movement of ships in the crucial waterway since the U.S. and Israel launched their war 7 weeks ago. The convoy was seen departing the Gulf and transiting the waterway, vessel tracking data shows. The group comprised 4 liquefied petroleum gas carriers and several oil product and chemical tankers, with more tankers following from the Gulf, according to marine traffic data. Control over the strait has proven to be one of Iran's main points of leverage, really their only one, and prompted the United States to deploy forces and initiate a blockade on Iranian ports as part of an effort to force Iran to accept a Pakistan-brokered ceasefire to end almost 7 weeks of war that has raged between Israel, the U.S., and Iran. Iran said earlier this week that it fully reopened the Strait of Hormuz to commercial vessels after a 10-day truce was announced between Israel and the Iranian-backed Hezbollah terror group in Lebanon. An end to Israel's war conflict with Hezbollah, reignited when the Lebanon-based terror group resumed rocket and drone attacks on Israel, was a key demand of Iranian negotiators, who previously accused Israel of breaking the ceasefire with strikes on Lebanon. Israel had said that the Iran truce did not cover Lebanon. But then Trump, of course, Trump said, no, Israel should stop. Should ceasefire in Lebanon. And yeah. Okay. Meanwhile, Trump on Saturday flatly rejected the idea of Iran imposing restrictions or tolls on the strait when asked by a reporter on Air Force One. Of course, nope, no way, nope. Trump said they're not going to be tolls. Of course there can't be. It's illegal. It's illegal. Opening the Strait of Hormuz just means opening an international waterway. It's not Iran's. Despite the escalation in the Strait of Hormuz, Pakistani officials say the United States and Iran are moving closer to a deal ahead of the April 22nd ceasefire deadline. And you saw in that clip there that Trump said, I'm not sure if I'm going to extend the deadline. We might have to start dropping bombs again. Things could be ramping up in that direction, with Iran now closing the Strait of Hormuz and the blockade still on. See, here's what's going on. This blockade is killing the Iranians. And Trump is refusing to stop the blockade, which is correct. I'll get to that in a bit. But so in their panic, they're trying to push back and by retaking control of the Strait of Hormuz, because they had given up a point of leverage that they had by opening it. And they're like, why did we give up that point of leverage if we're still being choked out by this blockade? Let's retake the Strait of Hormuz, and then it can be hopefully a negotiating point again. It's going to backfire on them, but nothing's working for them because they're losing. Even though mediators were optimistic, it was unclear to what extent Hezbollah would abide by a truce that did not play a role in negotiating, and which would leave Israeli troops deployed in parts of southern Lebanon. Trump said in another post that Israel is prohibited by the U.S. from further strikes. Enough is enough. In the Israel-Hezbollah war, the U.S. State Department said the prohibition applies only to offensive attacks and not to actions taken by Israel in self-defense. It goes beyond that, actually. The State Department statement actually said it's not only self-defense, but it's also if they see anything being planned, any planned attack is also included, right? We can even find that here. Let's go to the State Department. The State Department, here, let's go to that press release in the State Department just so we see it. Okay, let's find it. It's worth looking at again because it's so important. Whenever we're talking about this Lebanon ceasefire, here it is. This is the official State Department statement about the Lebanon ceasefire, and these are the stipulations. And look what it says here. Israel shall preserve its right to take all necessary measures in self-defense at any time against planned, imminent, or ongoing attacks, including planned attacks. They can strike against. Okay, so that's what Israel's doing. Again, that always gets framed as Israel violating the ceasefire because if something being planned, nothing's being fired, and then Israel strikes it. It looks like Israel shot first. Well, they did shoot first, but and therefore it's not considered by the outside world as self-defense. But so that's what's been happening in Lebanon. And live updates: 2 Indian ships come under fire in Strait of Hormuz after Iran reasserts control. Trump responded and said they got a little cute. We saw that in that clip. Israel is preparing for the possibility that the talks will collapse and the situation in the Strait will escalate, a source told the Khan, that's an Israeli public broadcaster. Iran said Saturday that control of the Strait of Hormuz has returned to its previous state under strict management and control of the armed forces. Okay, and Iran's Supreme National Security Council said it had been presented with new American proposals during a recent visit by Pakistan's army chief, who was serving as an intermediary with Washington. The council did not reveal what was in the proposals, but said that they were still under review. Iran fired on at least 3 tankers. We saw that. And briefing reporters at the White House, Trump downplayed the situation, insisting the dialogue with Iran is still working out really well, despite the closure of the Strait. And he said, we're talking to them. We'll have some information before the end of the day. Yeah. Okay. There we go. And, oh, here we go. This is important. Egypt and Pakistan were working very hard as mediators to bring about the final agreement between the United States and Iran. We hope to do so in the coming days. This is Egypt's Foreign Minister, Abdullahi. He says, we hope to do so in the coming days. Not only we in the region, but the whole world is suffering from the continuation of this war. We are pushing very hard to move forward. Pakistan is expected to host the second round of talks between Iran and the United States early next week. Speaking to journalists on the sidelines of the Antalya conference on Saturday, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister, Saeed Khatibzadeh, said that no date has been set for the next round of talks in Islamabad after the failure of the first round. No date has been set. Until we agree on the framework, we cannot set the date. There was significant progress made, actually, but the maximalist approach by the other side, trying to make Iran an exception from international law, prevented us to reach an agreement. Of course, you're an exception from international law. You're a rogue state. You're a state sponsor of terror. And Trump is trying to take you down. Of course, he's not treating you like a legitimate actor. Okay. I had to be very crystal clear that Iran would not accept to be an exception from the international law. Anything that we are going to be committed to will be within the international regulations and international law. These are people who like destroy other countries, but whatever. Asked about reports that Iran had again closed the Strait of Hormuz on Saturday after its temporary reopening, Khatibzadeh said Iran had announced it would allow safe passage of commercial vessels in line with the terms of the truce. The other side, the American side, tried to sabotage that by saying that it is open except for Iranians. So that was the reason we said that if you are going to violate the ceasefire terms and conditions, if Americans are not going to honor their words, there will be repercussions for them. Yeah, they're trying to scramble and get a ceasefire back going. So bottom line is this, everyone. The Straits of Hormuz are closed. Iran is playing this game. But here's the thing about the blockade. The blockade by the U.S. of Iran is a siege. It is siege warfare. And that means that the Iranian economy is getting completely strangled. Let's also add that there's a lot of money that Iran makes off the Strait of Hormuz, and they're not making that money. They're losing hundreds of millions. I think the estimated number is about $400 million a day by this situation, plus, because of the Strait of Hormuz, plus the blockade, on their country, which is essentially a siege. And the reason this is so important to keep this in place and to not remove the blockade during the negotiations is because of how the Iranians negotiate. This is a key point. The Iranians are phenomenal negotiators. They always have been. These are the Persians, and one of their key tactics is to always prolong and prolong and prolong the negotiations. Just keep them going and keep them going and keep them going. Because the way Westerners generally behave is that while they're negotiating, they don't attack, number one. Number two, the way Westerners are is that the longer negotiations go on, the more antsy the Westerners get to finally reach a deal. And they become more amenable to making concessions on points that they weren't originally going to make a concession on if you talk to them longer. It's a strange psychology because, you're talking to people, they have their demands, and you keep talking, and you keep talking, and you keep talking. And then eventually it's like, is there anything in this that you can, if you just change this, then we can make a deal. Now, that might not be something that someone would agree to in the initial stages of the conversation, but once the negotiations have been going on for weeks and months, they start dropping different demands because they want to cut a deal already. And this is what the Iranians do. And Trump is having none of it. And that's why when J.D. Vance first negotiated with them, and it fell apart, you might remember in his statement, he said, we gave them our last and best final offer, meaning like there's nothing going to change. And Trump said after that also that he instructed his people that he doesn't want 90 or 95% of his demands. He wants 100% of his demands met, and he puts a blockade on. So all of this is a way of saying to the Persians, saying to the Iranian mullahs, we're not playing your game. The blockade means that time is on America's side, not Iran's. So prolonging negotiations doesn't help Iran in this situation because there's a blockade on them. Every day they're getting choked. So it accelerates negotiations, which is what they don't want. And also by reiterating over and over again, by the Americans reiterating that 100% of their demands must be met, and the offer they made is all their conditions must be met, and they're not going to budge on any of them, also is a winning strategy against the Persians. Now, that doesn't mean that the Americans have handled this perfectly. They did give in on the Lebanon thing. Even though the Americans are insisting that the Lebanon ceasefire has nothing to do with the Iranian negotiations, nobody's buying that. And there's no reason to buy that. It's not real. Okay, obviously they're connected. The Iranians are insisting they're connected. And it's pretty clear that that's where this came from. Why else would Trump be telling Israel to stop fighting the Iranian front in Lebanon and stop degrading Hezbollah, who's been attacking Israel? Why would he do that? Obviously, he wanted it, to keep the ceasefire deal and the opening of Hormuz together, which were things that he had achieved out with Iran and the negotiations going on. It's obvious. Okay, so that was a win for the Iranians. But this blockade is critical. So long as this blockade is on, I'm hopeful that this is moving in the right direction. If there's any easing up of the blockade, that's where we have to worry that the Americans are losing their nerve. So that's what to look for in the days ahead. All right, folks. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe. Please drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Give me some constructive criticism if you see some things that I could change. I've been told a few times that I get a little too repetitive in these videos. I'm trying to work on that. If you have any other suggestions, I'm happy to hear them. God bless you.